Good evening, you're watching Just the News. I'm Amita Balachandra. Now, while there are massive protests against the Agnipath scheme across the country, there was a meeting that was called by the Defence Minister today, and a series of measures have now been announced by the centre. The first one is there will be a 10% reservation for Agnipath recruits in the jobs offered by the Home and Defence Ministry. Rajnath Singh has said, and I quote, "This reservation will be in addition to existing reservations for ex-servicemen. Necessary amendments to relevant recruitment rules will be undertaken to implement these provisions," end quote. Now, he also added that the scheme was rolled out after wide-ranging consultations, including with the ex-servicemen, and suggested that a misunderstanding is being spread for political reasons. Apart from this, the other measure that's been announced is that there is a 10% reservation for Agniveers in the Central Armed Police Forces and the Assam Rifles paramilitary forces. This was announced earlier today. The Union Home Ministry has also decided to give 3 years of age relaxation beyond the prescribed upper age limit to Agniveers for recruitment in CAPFs and Assam Rifles, while the first batch will get a relaxation of 5 years, because earlier the government has said that the upper age limit for 2022 will be increased from 21 to 23, and hence they will get a 5-year relaxation beyond the prescribed upper age limit for CAPFs and Assam rifle recruitment as well. Now, several BJP ruled states, including Assam, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, and Haryana, have already announced that they will be giving priority for Agniveers in their state police recruitment as well. In the meantime, protests across this country continues, especially in Bihar, which is bearing the maximum brunt of it all. Train services were stopped in Bihar till 8 p.m. today and will be suspended again at 4 a.m. tomorrow till 8 p.m. A railway station and a police vehicle were torched, and several law enforcers were injured in stone throwing as protesters tried to enforce a bandh. Over 350 trains were cancelled today across India. There were also protests reported in Kerala, Karnataka, Bengal, Uttar Pradesh, Telangana, and Haryana as well. In the meantime, in Bihar, following the protests, the Bihar government has ordered the suspension of internet services in 12 districts till the 19th of June. Also in the news, a private bus and a truck was set ablaze by protesters in Bihar's Jehanabad district early on Saturday. The statewide bandh has been called by various student unions against the centre's Agnipath scheme. Now, oppositions like the RJD have extended their support as well to the agitation by students. In the meantime, in Uttar Pradesh, the police have arrested 260 people in connection with the protests that took place on Friday. The maximum arrests were made in Balia, where train coaches were set on fire, followed by Mathura and Aligarh. Now, 23 people have been held and more than 1,000 booked in Palwal city of Haryana as well. In the meantime, a case has been registered in Secunderabad, where one person died during the protests yesterday. There's also a reaction that's come in from the Navy Chief. Indian Navy Chief Admiral R. Hari Kumar has said that he did not anticipate protests against the Agnipath scheme. Now, Kumar said that the protests were taking place due to, and I quote, "misinformation and misunderstanding," end quote. And this is largely the line taken by the government as well, where Defence Minister Rajnath Singh said something similar. Now, Mr. Kumar has said, and I quote, "We worked on Agnipath scheme for almost a year and a half. It is the single biggest human resources management transformation in Indian military," end quote. Also, a plea has been filed in the Supreme Court seeking an inquiry by a special investigation team into the violent protests that are taking place. The petitioner has also sought that an expert committee led by a retired Supreme Court judge be constituted to examine the impact of the scheme on the armed forces and India's national security. Now, to really understand why protesters are continuing to protest, what their main demands are, we are going to put out an explainer on Agnipath scheme and what the government has said so far. Do take a look at it and tell us what you think as well. Moving on from this story now, according to a report by Live Law, a CBI court has denied bail to Delhi Minister Satyendar Jain in a money laundering case. Now, he was arrested on the 30th of May. He's been remanded to Enforcement Directorate custody till the 27th of June. In the meantime, Delhi Deputy Chief Minister Manish Sisodia is handling his portfolios. An update on what's going on in Assam. The death toll has risen to 55 after 9 more residents, including 2 children, were found dead. Now, according to Disaster Management Agency reports, over 18.94 lakh residents have been affected in 28 districts due to the floods. Also in the news, National Conference Chief Farooq Abdullah on Saturday withdrew his name as a probable opposition candidate for the president's post. Now, in a statement, Abdullah has said that his name was suggested by West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee during the meeting of opposition leaders on the 15th of June. And that is really when the opposition leaders had decided to field a common candidate for the presidential election. Now, the presidential election is set to take place on the 18th of July. Earlier, NCP's Sharad Pawar had also said that he was not in the race for the president's post. An update on COVID numbers in the country. India has reported 13,216 new COVID cases in the last 24 hours, with Maharashtra and Kerala reporting the maximum number of cases. The daily positivity rate is at 2.73%. Now, Maharashtra has reported 4,165 new COVID cases, and Kerala has reported 3,162 new COVID cases. Delhi has reported 1,797 new COVID cases. On to news coming in from across the globe right now. Starting off with Kabul. Now, 2 people have died and several others are trapped in a gurudwara in Afghanistan's Kabul after 2 blasts rocked the city this morning. Now, the blast took place near the gates of a gurudwara and multiple gunshots were also heard. There was a reaction by the Ministry of External Affairs, which is said, and I quote, "We're deeply concerned at the reports emanating from Kabul about an attack on a sacred gurudwara in that city. We are closely monitoring the situation and waiting for further details on the unfolding developments," end quote. Moving on to what's happening in Ukraine now, Russian President Putin has condemned sanctions by Western countries and has called it, and I quote, "mad and thoughtless," end quote. Now, he said the restrictions were more harmful to those who imposed them. He also added that the EU could lose more than $400 billion because of its sanctions against Russia. In the meantime, it's been 115 days since the war started in Ukraine. One piece of good news before we wrap things up here on this bulletin. This is a report by the Indian Express. Maharashtra is set to witness its first theatre festival dedicated to mental health in Pune on the 5th of November. Now, 3 plays centered on mental health will be showcased at the Mansarang Theatre Festival at the Box, Pune on the 5th of November. Now, NGO Parivartan Trust has also announced that scholarships will be provided to prominent artists to bring mental health awareness through theatre. That brings us to the end of this bulletin. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.